Blessings, good evening to you all. Today is Tuesday, so it means we have a few questions have come in, which we'll endeavour to give you some answers to. And the first question is, how do we deal with periods in the practice when we lose energy and inspiration? Well, everybody will have experienced this, I would imagine. From the Buddha, he probably had his own struggles. Luang Por Chah certainly talked about his struggles in the practice, and we've all experienced the ups and downs of our energy level and inspiration. So that's probably why teachers encourage us to do things like just keep going, don't give up, practice patient endurance with the changing states of mind, physical conditions, mental conditions. And sometimes we suffer from always expecting to have high octane practice, lots of faith, lots of energy, keep going, a body that just never gives up, never gives out, lots of energy to put forth into the practice. That's the ideal, but it's not always possible. Physically, our body goes in cycles, and when you put forth effort, then afterwards you get tired. And mentally, we have our own karma, personality and karma to work through, and so there may be many different obstacles coming up from time to time in our practice. And then our own life situation has an effect. So if you're a monastic, then often you go back to square one. When you're lacking inspiration, you go back to asking yourself, why did you ordain? What was the purpose of it? And you're reminding yourself of the goals of the practice, which is liberation, peace, happiness, and the sort of things that inspired you to start. So like for me, I've always found going back just to the basic Buddhist teachings from the suttas or from teachers quoting the Buddha, the wisdom and compassion of the Buddha has always been so clear and apparent from just listening or studying Dhamma that everything else pales in comparison. So even though physically or mentally you may be struggling in your practice, when you hear the words of Dhamma, it kind of gets you back on track, illuminates the mind, literally has an illuminating effect, whereas times when you're feeling discouraged, despairing, low on energy, it tends to be when your mind darkens down and you forget the Dhamma and you forget why you're practicing, and you get caught up in different kinds of craving and attachment. So coming back to the Buddha and his teachings, people find can help to re-establish faith, remind them why they're doing it, and give them the strength to carry on and keep going through the obstacles. Also understanding how obstacles in the practice, when addressed with the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, so with right view and right effort, right mindfulness, they're often the places we learn from in our practice. How to summon up energy when we're feeling lazy or apathetic or uninspired. Having done that a few times, your mind learns its lessons, and that helps you to grow in the practice. Living with people who practice helps. So if you're with Sangha, then you get some inspiration and good examples from others. If you're a layperson, then you have to maybe put more effort into finding the Dhamma and finding Kalyana Mitta, good friends in the practice, because they'll support you, especially through difficult times. And then patience and an acceptance that, you, as I said, physically you're not always going to feel at your best, so don't expect that. We get ill, we have aging, sickness and death to deal with as part of our practice, but they're also the fertile ground for understanding of why we practice and for insight to arise. Just with meditation, you're not going to be peaceful every time you meditate, so see what you can gain from meditation when you're not particularly peaceful. You can still put forth effort when your mind is distracted, or you're very sleepy and tired, or physically you're feeling, you're experiencing pain, discomfort. You can still put forth effort and learn as you meditate through those experiences, if you see them as experiences to be learnt from. The way you're thinking, the kinds of mental states you're experiencing, the changing nature of the body, this is all fertile ground for developing insight and wisdom. Wisdom into the impermanence of the mind. How often have we been caught out and believed in a certain mind state? I am feeling down, depressed, discouraged, bored, fed up. And then you keep practicing, and after a while it clears, just like storm clouds come in here into the mountains, and for a while it's dark and rainy, and then after a while they clear and you get the sun. Our mind is like that, so if you keep practicing, maybe you can see the rising of the storm clouds. They come in, and the darkness and the discouragement and the negativity of the mind, but then you see the other side as well. If you persist, you're patient and you keep practicing, and then it's not certain. My moods, my mental states change. And then you don't believe them so much, and you don't invest so much energy in them when they come up, but you're more willing to watch and learn from them rather than become depressed, become unhappy, become uninspired. So there's many things you could say on all this, but probably the best thing is go back to the Buddha and his words. Practice patience, don't give up, keep going, and try to learn even from when you lose energy and inspiration. So another question. When I'm anxious about things, I find myself being short-tempered with other people. How can I practice with this? Smile a bit more. Smiling helps, doesn't it? Probably a good regular practice that the Buddha encouraged, one of the sort of regular standard practices, to develop metta, the thoughts of loving kindness, which also lead on to karuna, compassion, mudita, sympathetic joy, opaquer, equanimity, the Brahmavihara Dhammas. Should be practiced regularly as meditations, reflections, and then in practical ways putting those qualities into practice in your daily life. So a bit like, COVID, you have your different ways of dealing with COVID. You have preventative and curative. You have preventative, so you have all the things you do to try and avoid catching it. You wear gloves, you wear masks, you keep yourself clean, you practice social distancing. If a vaccine's available, maybe you get a vaccine. All of that is preventative. But then if you get it, well, then you have to do whatever the medical practitioners require you to do, rest, take certain medications, get help and so on. It was the same with anxiety and ill temper, anger. You can practice preventative practices with that. So develop goodwill every day. Before you get angry, already be practicing goodwill. Bring it up as a thought. Make your mind really clear on developing that thought towards yourself, then to others, It could be simply every morning, may all the people I meet today be well, be happy, and developing a sincerity in that, not just a casual sort of say it and then forget it, but actually developing that thought, that intention sincerely. And that's one reason why we do chanting. Chanting verses or reading verses about metta and the practice of metta can help there. So that when maybe later on you're experiencing anxiety about things, tiredness, frustration in the course of work, and you start to notice yourself getting short-tempered, you can come back to that verse that you've been reciting and chanting, the thought of metta, as quickly as you can. You can bring it up again, over and over again if necessary. So being familiar with the practice of metta on the level of action, speech, and then mental intention, practicing it regularly so that it's close by, close at hand, like a tool that you can use when you need it. And then also basic mindfulness practice and some wise reflection, discernment. So get to notice, when do you feel most stressed and lose your temper most easily? Or maybe later in the day when you're physically tired, maybe when you've got a pile of work to do and you're feeling the pressure of a deadline or just that workload. There may be certain triggers that you can start observing as you pay more attention to yourself. So then you can, again, practice preventative medicine, preventative practice. Be aware, at these times I'm going to get angry easily, I better be prepared. Think about that. How can I have a plan, have a strategy? How can I manage my workload so it doesn't feel so burdensome? How do I manage myself when I'm feeling physically tired and run down? Well, you have to know that you're physically tired and run down. Try to be aware of that and then plan your time around that feeling, so maybe you take on a little bit less when you're feeling tired. Find ways to relax, find ways to take a break at that time when it helps you to not lose your temper. You learn from your own experience what times of day, what situations tend to make you angry or anxious that will lead on to anger. So you're learning. If you keep learning, then those lessons will stick, some of them, and you can change habits and be more aware, more restrained, more careful. And you carry on like that. And then also, well, at least have a strategy in place. If you do lose your temper with someone, how are you going to fix the situation? So improve your ability to communicate, practice right speech with that person, or maybe apologize or find ways to reconnect with them if you lost your temper with them. The Buddha used to say, if you've really got angry with somebody, see if you can get to the point where you can give them a gift to teach yourself to let go of your anger and to show them that you still mean them well. So give a gift to that very person you got annoyed with. There's so many areas you can practice here, both on the level of mental states, the way we think, our attitudes, our speech, our actions. But think it through first. This is part of our practice, developing discernment, wise reflection to identify problems and then think about solutions and practices that you can start to develop around them. Another question. When I meditate, after 5 minutes, lots of thoughts about my office work come into my mind to remind me of outstanding work I haven't done. Is this good or bad? Why is this so? Well, before we judge it as good or bad, it's normal. Everybody suffers this. Even monks, There's always things we haven't done yet that we need to do, or things we've done that we're not happy with, or have left an impression on our mind. And we have memory, the ability to remember our experience and perceptions, which kind of give an importance to those memories and label them, good, bad, pleasant, unpleasant, all kinds of signs and features we store up based on memories. And so you go to work, there'll be, unfortunately, periods of your work day when you're not that aware. You're doing things out of habit, unconsciously, on autopilot. Some of the time you'll be more aware, some of the time less aware. But all the time we're absorbing thoughts, sense impressions. Thoughts are coming up, sense impressions are coming into our mind through the eyes, ears, nose, taste, smell, and then thoughts themselves. And a lot of that we're absorbing unconsciously, so it's a very good thing to practice meditation regularly. So when you sit down to meditate, well, that's going to come up. A lot of it will be regurgitated. Things that you missed during your day will re-emerge, and sometimes it's showing you where you've picked up particular perceptions of pleasant experiences, unpleasant experiences. So as you practice mindfulness, you'll get all this stuff coming up, and often you just have to wade through it, past sense impressions and memories coming up. But all they are is now kind of second-hand experience, and you can, if you keep developing some awareness and discernment, wisdom, you can just watch and let them go again, because that's all they are. They're just sense impressions re-emerging, even unpleasant ones. Ultimately, they're just memories and sense impressions. They may bring some strong feelings with them, but then they arise, they pass away. So you can also reflect on the changing nature and the impermanence of sense impressions, and keep working at developing mindfulness. And so you're gradually bringing your mind to the present moment. And usually you're using an object, say the breath, for example. So keeping your mind on the breath, and all the sense impressions that keep coming up, the memories and the states of agitation, this job I haven't done yet, still needs to be done. Gradually you can start to let them go, and they come up less and they have less intensity, and the breath becomes more your focus and your anchor. And then you can see, well, all of that stuff is just thoughts and sense impressions and memories arising, passing away. Then it doesn't bother you so much. Of course, you may still have many things you have to do, a whole list of things you've got to do in your mind, but now you can see a list is just a list. And this is not the time, say as you're meditating, this is not the time to do all those things. It's not even the time to plan them or think about them. This is the time you can safely and happily let them go. And that's very good for us to practice letting go, even if quite important business, if there's really nothing to do about it at this time, better to let it go so it's not bothering your mind, and you'll be able to pick it up later. So you're practicing the ability to bring out mindfulness and then let go, and that's a skill, and you need to practice regularly, and you get better at it. And you will find thoughts, memories, images, mental agitation about things you have and haven't done will fade. As you practice this, you'll get better at focusing your mind, just seeing the impermanent nature of memories and thoughts. And that will help you, give you more steadiness of mind, more of an understanding of how the mind works. Another question: if I find concentration, meditation hard, can I do reflection? I find meditating in the morning is better than the evening. Well, these are important points. With the practice of meditation, if you're regularly doing it, I would invest some time looking and learning from your experience what is the best time of day for you, physically, mentally, to meditate. And many people do find the morning is a good time because you're fresh, beginning your day, haven't done much activity yet, so your mind can maybe focus better. Um, but it's not always the morning. Some people find late at night is a good time because the body is very light, having digested food, but then they find working all day, they come home very tired, they've still got a household to run maybe, so then they'd like to meditate, but they can't do it very well because they're so tired. So sometimes you also have to help yourself. So some people come home from work, do their business, and then have a nap, a short nap. And then they still have a few hours left in the night time to do some meditation, having had that nap. So it is good to work out the times of day where you find your meditation is easier, you're less sleepy, less tired, and then try and at least find some times when that time period is free for you, so you can really enjoy your meditation. Of course, sometimes there'll be times when you're tired, worn out, and it's a bit of a struggle, but try to find those good times. You'll get to know your own body, your own cycles, your own feelings in the body, and then use those times to really enjoy your meditation, and that will keep you going even though other times it's hard work. So if you work, say, 5 days a week, and you find meditation is tough because you've got so much workload, you're physically tired, mentally, your brain is full of stuff from work, mentally tired, when you come home, say, well, maybe on the weekend you pick a Saturday or a Sunday and you keep some time available to practice meditation, and it's a day when you're less stressed and less activities, so you can maybe get into your meditation more. So you have to look at how your mind and body support the practice, and look at your whole lifestyle and how you feel and how things are going, and you learn from that. As far as concentration meditation being hard, yeah, of course it's hard. We have all these hindrances to work with. Can I do reflection? Yes, you can. That's one way we deal with the hindrances and the mental stuff that comes up as we're meditating. Sometimes we use wisdom and insight to cut it off. So Ajahn Chah used to say, just keep bringing up the reflection. It's not sure, it's uncertain, it's anicca, it's impermanent. So you maybe have a lot of thoughts and it seems really to be blocking you and filling your mind out all these thoughts and worries, and you don't seem to be able to find your normal meditation object. The mind is too weak, you can't put awareness on the breath very well, and you're just following and lost in all these thoughts or falling asleep. Well, sometimes you use wisdom to help and just reflect, these thoughts are all impermanent. Just look at them and you watch them, how they arise and pass away, they start, they cease, and keep doing that. And that can work too, just seeing the impermanence of your own thinking mind. Even when you're a bit weak physically, you can still watch the mind. And what's impermanent ultimately is nothing fixed, solid. It's teaching you something about your own physical and mental experience, the changing feelings, changing thoughts. They're not sure, they're not certain. And that's some insight, that's something you've gained from your meditation, even if you're sitting there full of thinking, the thinking mind just endlessly thinking, and you think, oh, my meditation's terrible. But you can still watch and learn from that experience. You gain some patience and also some insight into the impermanent, changing nature of the mind. Even if it's absolutely chock-a-block with thoughts and worries and it's issues that are just pressing on your mind as you're trying to meditate, if you're patient and you keep working, coming back to your breath, watching the impermanence of thoughts arising, passing away, you may get to a point where it all clears. Again, like a cloudy sky clears. And you can see even the worst mental agitation, anxiety, restlessness has its ending because our mind is changing. And so these hindrances will come to their end, and maybe another hindrance will be ready to arrive and start again, but you can catch the ending of some mental agitation and you say, that was really bothering me a while ago, now it's not, it's gone. And you can see your own moods and mental states are impermanent. And you do that through reflection. Another question. Please kindly advise, how do we practice opaquer in the current COVID-19 situation? We see so many people suffering now in Thailand, and I feel I can do so little to help. Thank you. Well, it is an unusual time in modern history, that's for sure. Everyone would agree on that, the spread of the COVID virus. But we can see it's affecting the whole world, so nobody should feel left out in this. Everybody is being affected by it in one way or another. So we're all in it together. So there's a certain commonality, and that can help you to just accept, well, we've all got to work to learn to live with this and deal with it as skillfully as we can. And now you see why the Buddha encouraged us to reflect, that aging, sickness and death are totally normal and just part of the human experience, and we should be reminding ourselves of that every day. And so when you hear the COVID news, it is reminding you of that truth. We all get sick, we are all exposed to viruses. If we're unlucky, we catch it. And unfortunately, a few people die from it. But even without COVID, people are getting sick, getting old and dying anyway, and if COVID is sorted out one day, there'll still be aging, sickness and death to deal with. So maybe look under the surface is one way you bring your mind to opaquer, where you accept this is part of the human realm. We are sensitive beings, and we are prey or prone to get ill, disease, virus, bacteria, all kinds of illnesses and diseases are around, injury as well, and other forms of physical suffering are there. So of course we start with the basic wish, may all beings be well, free from illness, free from COVID, free from suffering. We do the best we can ourselves, and then we, if we can do anything to help others, any kinds of acts of kindness, charity, well, that's good. But we have to reflect wisely on this fact that we are all the owners of our karma, and sometimes karma comes our way in the form, it may be in the form of COVID. And one thing in the practical sense is like, just reflect on how your attachment, whether it's to your country and you're worried about all the population, or one group of people, your particular group of friends, relatives, family, that identification is a form of attachment which will lead to suffering, the worry, the concern. You have to keep asking yourself, my worries, my anxiety, my fears, is that helping me or them? Or is it actually bringing my mind to a more unwholesome, unskillful mental state, stopping me from thinking clearly how to deal with the current situation? Maybe I even pass on my anxieties to others through my speech. So that when you think this through, you're seeing the value of developing more mindfulness, more equanimity, so you can look after your mind better, cope with the situation, and also help others better. How much each person can do for others, well, depends on our life situation, how much time, energy, who we are, what skills, what barami we have. Well, that depends for each person. But if you've got a sick relative, you put yourself in their place. If you're sick, say in hospital or at home with COVID, you yourself have anxiety because you're ill, you're not sure what's going to happen, and then your family come in and they're all crying and worried and anxious, and putting all that onto you, it only makes life worse, doesn't it? So then you see the value of equanimity. And equanimity doesn't mean to say you don't care or you're cold, but you're seeing the best thing to do is stay as calm, mindful as you can to help those who do have COVID or are sick. Because if you're crying, suffering, worrying in all the different ways we do, it only makes their life, their situation worse, adds to their problems. So we want to try and maintain the calm equanimity as much as possible so we can help ourselves, help others. And maybe this will lead on to more pressing wish for nibbana, for developing the path out of suffering. When we face suffering at first, it's difficult, of course, it's painful, it's a challenge, but when we take a moment to contemplate what's going on, the wisdom can see suffering, the nature of human existence is bound up with suffering. We say that, I am bound up with dukkha. It's mixed up with dukkha, even though there is pleasure and happiness, of course, but it's bound up with suffering. And then the next thought can be, what's the way out? And the Buddha has shown us the way out. He's given this Eightfold Noble Path, the Four Noble Truths, the practices of dana, sila, bhavana, sila, samadhi, panya. He's given us the way out, so that suffering can become a spur, a motivation to practice. But you have to sit down and think about that. Look at it with the eye of wisdom, rather than just get caught up into the suffering and get into more anxiety, more fear, more sadness, more unhappiness, because that doesn't help us and it doesn't help anyone else. The world has been through pandemics before, and unfortunately there may still be more pandemics ahead. So that human beings definitely can learn to get through pandemics and deal with these things. And the more we practice the Dhamma, develop mindfulness, kindness, compassion, and use wisdom and discernment, the better we'll all get through the pandemic and deal with it better. Someone was talking to me today about Ajahn Dasa, who very wise, peaceful monk in Thailand, and how when he got to the end of his life, he lived to about the age of 84, if I remember, he declined medical help. He had a heart condition, and even though important people, even the royalty, would send doctors to him, he said, I'm not going to hospital. He said, the earth is my hospital. I'm going to stay here in the forest and the earth will be my hospital. He loved simplicity, he loved to be close to nature, in the trees, in the forest where he lived. And he said, there's no need to, take me to the hospital, put me on all those sort of medical equipment. I'm just going to use the earth as my hospital and contemplate. I want to learn about aging, sickness and death from this experience, the experience of his heart condition, which eventually killed him. It's only on the day he died that they took him to hospital, and it was too late, nothing would work for him. So they brought him back to the monastery and he died. As soon as he returned to the monastery, he died. He didn't want to die in hospital, and he kept to that. He said, I'm going to study and learn from aging, sickness and death, because that's what the Buddha taught us to do. And he was one who was always encouraging people to study and learn from their experience so they can free their mind from suffering, the causes of suffering. That's what we have to do to deal with COVID. We have to learn from it. So the scientists and researchers, doctors are learning the medical side of it, how to treat it, how to develop vaccines and so on. We have to learn how to deal with it as a disease and then its effects on our life, society, the rules and regulations, the effect on the economy, deal with maybe a loss of income and problems there, deal with the actual physical disability of illness and all the different issues. These are things we have to learn from. And learn also to see our own craving and attachment as it arises in relation to COVID. So if you take it as a learning thing, something to educate yourself, well, could even be the cause for your own enlightenment. Another question. Is there a wandering ghost realm? Because if one is reborn into a hungry ghost or a hell realm, isn't that supposed to be that we are jailed in a fixed realm location? Why then are there so many ghosts and ghost haunting stories? Why are there so many ghosts? It's because people don't make enough good karma, so when they die they be reborn as ghosts. Luang Por Blien, who had the divine eye and great samadhi and great skills with the mind and would see beings in other realms, he'd come to Australia, or he'd go around the world when he was alive. People would invite him to different countries, and he'd always complain how there's so many ghosts around in these different cities he visited. Nobody's making merit for them. It's such a shame that nobody understands about dedication of merit, and people don't understand about making good karma so that when they die they don't get reborn as ghosts. I even took him into one part of Melbourne, I won't tell you which, and he said, let's get out of here, there's too many ghosts around. So, it's basically people don't make merit, so they don't get a very good rebirth. Hopefully it's not for long, but we don't know. But wandering ghost realm, well, yeah, I mean, you sort of, hungry ghosts, or hell realm beings, like devas, they're spontaneously born. They still have a very subtle body, but it's spontaneous birth, spontaneous death, different from a human who's 9 months in the womb. So when you have spontaneous birth, spontaneous death, then it can seem very quick. So it can seem like beings are wandering from realm to realm, being born here, dying, born, dying. But they're not really wandering, they're really just consciousness is arising according to karma, causes and conditions. So it arises in a ghost realm or a heaven realm. It's there for a period of that karma, and then that karma ceases, and then reborn out of that realm into another realm. Maybe as a human, maybe as an animal, a ghost realm, heaven realm, just depends. So when you're dealing with subtle bodies and spontaneous birth, well, it's a whole new ball game. It's not the same as humans. It can affect our perception, so the imagination takes over, so we get lots of movies. Why do we get movies and books about ghost stories, as you said? Well, because they sell. You can make a living making movies about ghosts, and everyone's seen a ghost movie and got scared, and then they go back and see another one. So there's a sort of a subtle attachment there, isn't it? People sometimes like to be scared. It's exciting, stimulating, and there is maybe a certain subconscious belief already that maybe there are these beings around. But really, ghosts can't do a lot because they've got a subtle body. They can't actually influence the human realm that much. Not saying it's impossible, but we far over-exaggerate this whole thing about ghosts haunting people, possessing people, harming people. That really is the industry of movies and novels and things. In Thailand, teachers like Ajahn Chah used to say, when people would ask him, are there ghosts here? Do ghosts exist? He said, look at the ghosts in your mind. Thoughts of greed, anger and delusion, they're the real ghosts, because they take away your goodness. We get worried about a ghost is going to haunt us and scare us, but actually it's our own mind and our own unskillful thinking of what haunt us and scare us. When you see your own anger, but you've got a moment of mindfulness and you see it, it's like, ooh, you're seeing how bad your mind can be. If you're thinking you want to throttle someone, you're angry with someone, you might not do it, but the thought is scary, isn't it? That's like seeing the ghost of your own mind, or your own greed, your obsession with something, or your desire for intoxication and so on. They're like the ghosts of the mind. So that's where you can really understand the ghost realm, by understanding your own mind. Whatever's out there in other realms, you're prey to imagination. If you can't see them, then your mind will imagine all kinds of stuff, and then you can movies and scare each other. So I'm not saying they don't exist, I'm just saying the ghosts in the mind are the more important ones to deal with. Further question is, since we have countless past lifetimes, it sounds too difficult to cultivate enough merit within this single lifetime to clean out the balance of the past bad karma we have done. I'm not sure you have to clean out the balance, but if we couldn't get beyond this karma-making process, then there'd be no Buddha Dhamma Sangha. I mean, the whole point of Nibbana is you reach the point where you abandon the sense of self in all its manifestations, the delusion of self, the attachment of self, self-view, attachment to the body, attachment to feelings, mental states as self, and then you stop making karma. So if you couldn't get to that point where you've seen through the delusion of self, and so there's no more karma making taking place, if that couldn't happen, then there'd be no Nibbana, there'd be no Buddha. So that's where you get your inspiration from. It can be done. We can get beyond our karma. We can get to the point where we stop making karma and it all ends and there's no more birth. Just as we chanted in the Dhammacakka Sutta, this is my last birth. No more karma is being made, so this is my last birth. So what happens to all that previously made good and bad karma? Well, it just fizzles out because there's no more self to receive the fruits after that last life. No more self to make karma, no more self to receive fruits in a future life. So it just kind of fizzles out. You could say you step ahead of the karma and then it just drops, ends, it can't give its result. You could say, looking at it as a sort of metaphorically, it's like all these people chasing you, your good and bad karma, chasing to kind of get you and give their result, but now they can't chase you anymore because there's no one left to chase. Emptiness has been, insight into emptiness of self has been achieved. So that's why we can practice, but you don't have to clean out the balance of your bad karma. Every bad thing you ever once did, what you have to clean out is the mind that's full of greed, anger, delusion and attachment to self. That's what you're cleaning out. So, there's all these stories of people who've attained Nibbana, but then they still have old karma giving its result because they're still alive with the body. And so they may even die an unpleasant death, like Venerable Moggallana. Ultimately he died because a group of gangsters, bandits, caught him and killed him. And he said, this is my karma, I can't avoid this anymore. It's been chasing me for so many lifetimes. He said it was based on having one previous lifetime, many, many lifetimes before, he'd killed his own mother. Very strong bad karma. So that had followed him to this life. And even though he's reached Nibbana, there's no more karma to be made, there's no attachment to self. The fruits of his old karma were still powerful enough to ripen and be the cause of his death. But after that, finished. So arahants will still be receiving the fruits, some of the fruits of their old karma, but not all of it. Some of it will just fade out. But they'll still receive the fruits of some of their old karma. So they still have to experience aging, sickness and death, but mentally there's no suffering with that. The mind is free, the mind is equanimous towards their own suffering, the suffering of others. So the mind is totally free to see it all as Dhamma and totally free to practice compassion, teach the Dhamma and help other people because there's no more self-interest or self-attachment or delusion. But as long as they got a body, then they can still be experiencing some of their old karma ripening. But once they die, enter Nibbana, that's it. There's no more chance for karma to give its result. So they don't have to go back and clean out the old balance sheet. They've cleaned out their mind, that's more important. Old karma has been made, it's been done, good and bad, and we have to accept that. And it will while we're alive, keep giving its results, good and bad. And we just keep making good. So one way they say, you keep making good karma through the practice, ever more good karma. The bad karma has less and less chance to give its fruit, doesn't it? It may give its fruit, but it doesn't bother you too much because you're making the good karma of developing the path of sila, samadhi, panya. So it's like, you may have some misfortunes in your life, some bad things happen, people don't like you, you get ill or injured, but it doesn't bother you too much because your mind is in a wholesome state from all the good karma you're making, the practice you're doing. And this is how the old bad karma is used up, but it doesn't necessarily bother you mentally. Mentally you can be in a wholesome state while your body is suffering, or you're having problems with other people who are against you or don't like you. Things happen, but mentally the mind is not creating suffering out of that. And sometimes, like with Lumpur Buddha Dasa, at the end he had plenty of physical suffering. You used to go and see him, and he'd still just happily talk the Dhamma to people. Even the very last day, until he died, he was preparing to give a talk in the morning. He loved to give Dhamma talks at like 5 a.m. The very day he died, he was still preparing to teach. He just got up at 4 a.m. and said, I'm not going to make it today. And the monks who look after him knew, that's unusual, something's up. So they started to see what they could do for him, but that was his last day. So he had plenty of suffering up to that point. As we know, Lumpur Cha had 10 years of severe illness and debilitating illness to go through, and everyone was saying, what karma has led to this? Well, we don't know what karma led to it, but it was some kind of karma. But when he died, that's gone, finished. Or there's those 5 senior monks, disciples of Ajahn Mun, who died in the plane crash in Thailand. It was about the year I went to Thailand that happened. Everyone is saying, these monks were considered arahants. How come they get in a plane and the plane crashes because of bad weather, storm brought it down and they died? Well, that's some of their old karma coming back. But mentally, we believe there was no fear, no suffering with that. It just happened, and that's what karma does. It gives its result, and often there's nothing you can do about it. But whether you suffer with that karma or not is a matter of how well your mind is trained. Or Ajahn Mahabor, we used to go and see him. One time went to see him, he'd just been in a car accident. He's in a minibus with a couple of other monks and a driver, and the minibus left the road. I can't remember whether it hit somebody or something, and it left the road and spun. And one of the monks, his assistant monks, got a terrible back injury from that. Ajahn Mahabor just had a few bruises, and he just said, this is my old karma coming up. But mentally there was no suffering with that. You still have to as long as you've got a body, you've got to put up with some of your old karma giving its fruit. The important thing is you're not making fresh, new, bad karma. You're not harming other beings, you're not harming yourself. So gradually the old karma wears off, finishes, and that's the end of it. And then when you die, for an arahant, that's it. They don't get reborn again. So that's what we can aspire to, even in this time of COVID. We can aspire to getting to the point where we're making no more karma. The arahant, he doesn't make good karma when the arahant, he or she, does good things. It's not that they're doing that and making karma with a sense of self. It's just what you might call pure kindness, pure compassion. Teaching, helping people, spreading metta, soothing people's suffering in one way or another. That's done because they can do it. Because they're in a position to help, they have the skills, the energy, they may help people, but there's no karma made. They call it giriya citta in the Abhidhamma. Giriya means just behaviour. It's just the behaviour of arahants to have metta and compassion and share their wisdom with others, but there's no sense of self doing that. There's no craving or attachment to it. They just do it because they can, and it's the right thing to do in different situations. So I think that was the last question for today. So hopefully it's given you some form of answers, and we can bring the meeting to a close.